Hi, I'm Xarani. In this video, we're going to talk about Ronova. Who is Ronova, and why does she seem the most interested in searching for Asmoday? Two questions that have been on my mind for a while. Ronova is one of the four shades, created by the Heavenly Principles, and before Sun and Moon, tells us that the shades were created during the time when doves held branches, which is basically the Tevat historian's way of saying when the primordial one descended and took over. So if that is when the shades were created, then that is when Ronova came into being. We do not know concretely whether Ronova and the other shades already existed during the war the primordial one waged against the Seven Sovereigns. However, during the 40 years that followed before Nibelung returned, we do know that the shades were already around. Ronova, as the ruler of death, also seems to have a connection to the ley lines. Since souls return to the ley lines upon death, I believe that at least part of the ley line system falls under Renova's jurisdiction. Because of that, I think it would make sense if she spent those early years helping construct the ley lines throughout Tevat as well, but I'll come back to this idea later. After Nibelung returned to Tevat bearing abyssal corruption, the War of Funerary Flame ravaged the globe and hit Natlan especially hard, causing the ley lines there to be severely damaged. In the aftermath, Kuchin, an ancient angel later known as Lord of the Night, created the Night Kingdom under Renova's guidance by reconstructing a new network from the remnants of those broken ley lines. Renova's involvement was described as an expression of love and an act of reparation, but the Heavenly Principles saw this as an overstep of her authority as a shade. After being censured by the Heavenly Principles, Ronova succumbed to self-pity and became increasingly indifferent to the fate of the land. This is a prime example of where we see that the shades do in fact have emotions. But one other thing I want to point out is that she had the knowledge to guide the reconstruction of the ley lines into the Night Kingdom. And that's why I think it's not unreasonable to assume that she may have helped weave the ley lines during those 40 years between the war against the Seven Sovereigns and the return of Nibelung. But anyway, many centuries later, a human known as Xbalanque defeated the pyro dragon known as Xocotl, who was ruling Natlan at the time. Xbalanque rose to the throne of the Pyro Archon as the first human to do so, after defeating Xocotl in battle. Immediately after Xocotl's defeat, Ronova appeared before Xbalanque and showed him Natlan's grim future. After learning the fate of his nation, Xbalanque decided to bargain with the ruler of death to borrow her power to create the rules needed to resist the Abyss, the Ode of Resurrection, and the Pilgrimage of the Return of the Sacred Flame. One notable quote from this interaction is when Ronova says, "I am merely a shade, and I do not have as much freedom to do as I please as you might think." Even so, she agreed to let the Archon borrow her power, but she also warned Xbalanque that if this was ever discovered by the Heavenly Principles, she would claim her power was stolen and deny any involvement, and that using her power came with the price of death. This makes me think Ronova may fear the Heavenly Principles, maybe due to her previously being censured by them, and knows that she's taking a risk to help humanity once more. After all, a strong emotion like compassion is hard to bury. But as the ruler of death, Ronova does not just take life, she can also deny it. In Khaenri'ah, 500 years ago, there was a cataclysm. The main culprits responsible for causing this disaster were the Vinster King and the Five Sinners, and part of the consequences for Khaenri'ah's sins was a curse. One laid upon the pure-blooded Khaenri'ahns, which was a curse of immortality. Because as the ruler of death, Ronova can decide how one dies, when one dies, or whether they will ever be able to die at all. I don't believe Ronova cast this curse as her own choice, though. She cast the curse as part of her duty as the ruler of death, since this was an official response by Celestia to Khaenri'ah's violation of the laws of Tevat. Because as we know from her previous act, she often works in favor of humanity, even behind the Heavenly Principles' back. This is important as we now move back to present-day Natlan. When we beat the Abyss and the Pyro Archon's plan succeeded, Ronova required payment for the powers given to the Pyro Archon, and that payment was the death of Malvika, since she was the Pyro Archon of the time. But when Capitano arrived and tried to take Malvika's place as the sacrifice Ronova required, he forced Ronova to make a choice. or at least so it seems. Remove the curse of immortality from him, or give up the payment of death for the power lent to the Archon, allowing him to deny the ruler of death the death she seeks to witness. Ronova decides that the curse of immortality must stand, and tells Capitano to use the curse as he sees fit, allowing Capitano to have his revenge. This situation makes me even more certain that Ronova has no choice in what she has to uphold as the ruler of death, and cannot change the laws she governs. Because remember, the Cataclysm in Khaenri'ah had an official response from Celestia, but the Pyro Archon's deal with Ronova was under the table and off the books. So her needing to witness the death of the Archon was never really actually set in stone, but the curse of immortality was. Now there's one more thing I want to look at, because at this point I really do think Ronova is less free than she looks, and honestly, that's the part I'm most curious what you all think about. In the God's Limits teaser, Ronova makes a deathly entrance as she destroys Rhindaughter's experimental life forms inside a space that looks similar to Windrise created by Asmoday, while Istaroth, Rhindaughter/Naberius, and Ronova are looking for her. Ronova tells Rhindaughter to stop littering other people's spaces with her bizarre creations, and then turns to Istaroth and asks her why she gave them history. They conclude that Asmoday is not there, and Ronova sighs and says, "Where has she gone?" It's time to put this space out of its misery. Later, they hold a meeting of the Shades in Celestia where Asmoday is also absent, so they begin discussing where she could be. In the meeting, Ronova seems the most concerned about Asmoday's whereabouts, where she kicks off that no one ever misses these meetings, and she tells the other Shades that they need to find Asmoday. Istaroth raises the question of what if that's not even a good idea? What if finding her just causes more trouble? When Istaroth raises the idea that Asmoday may have switched sides, Ronova seems taken aback and says that she could only do so if she loves her new master more than herself, almost unwilling to accept that idea. So here's what I think. Ronova was cast as one of the Shades to rule over the laws of death in Teyvat, but I do not think deep within her she is as cold and indifferent as she seems now. She seems to have shown more compassion in the past. It is hinted that she cared a lot about the future of humanity and the land, and in the hymns of the far north there's evidence that supports that even further. From Prayer Song 3 to Onatar, the fate of all living beings rests solely in your hands, and you remain unmoved no matter how fervent the plea. Yet noble and majestic goddess, we know that gentleness and mercy are your first nature, just as you granted our ancestors liberation from suffering and extended it not. To me, when I look at everything together, Ronova seems like someone who has deep feelings, but has long since numbed them in order to do her job and nothing further. She did what she thought was her duty as the ruler of death when she guided the Lord of Night in reconstructing the ley lines into the Night Kingdom as an expression of love and reparation. But the heavenly principles saw that as an overstep of her authority and censured her for that display of compassion. I think she found herself in a situation that was quite painful for her to bear. We do not know exactly how she was censured, but I think whatever happened made her hide away her true nature. And this is where Renova's decision when faced with the paradox that Capitano presented makes more sense. By that point, Ronova has already long become indifferent towards the fate of the world, so the most she will do is enforce the official rules she has to uphold, as anything beyond that she could see as potentially overstepping her authority again. If Ronova was free, she could have chosen to release Capitano from his immortality and then witness his death in the Archon's place. But she could not make that choice, just like she told Xbalanque in the past, that she as a Shade is not as free as one would think. This gives me the feeling that the Shades may be tied to their own predetermined fates, or at the very least they may not be free to change the rules they are made to govern, because so far they do not seem to be able to dictate those rules, they only seem to be able to enforce them. So to me, who is Ronova? Ronova is the ruler of death, one with a gentle and compassionate nature, one that used to have compassion for humanity in the land until she was censured for overstepping, and fell into self-pity wherein she would wall off her true nature. As for why she seems so interested in finding Asmoday, she might have multiple reasons. I think one of them may be because Ronova understands what happens when a Shade crosses a line. If what the heavenly principles did to her caused her to numb her emotions, then Ronova may fear what could happen to Asmoday and the rest of the Shades if the heavenly principles awaken and discover actual betrayal. Ronova was censured for much less and suffered because of it, so Asmoday disappearing or even switching sides would possibly result in something far worse, which is why Renova's concern about Asmoday looks more fearful. Just taking one example from the many terrible things the Heavenly Principles have done, it wouldn't be hard to imagine that the Heavenly Principles might punish all of them for the transgressions of only one shade, and I'm sure she hasn't ruled out that possibility either. If I'm being honest, the Heavenly Principles censuring Renova for ruling with love and compassion by guiding the reconstruction of ley lines makes me dislike the Heavenly Principles even more. Comment your thoughts below, and if you enjoy lore deep dives, theories, and build guides, subscribe because I have a lot more coming. Thanks for watching. Bye!